So it is not to believe anything that the mind has to say, that we are so quick to just believe the mind and move from assumption that what the mind says is right, to move according to the mind's instructions and overlook the simple, open, spacious being that is the true nature. Life is hard because we believe the mind and we move from the belief in the mind. It is to come to a freedom where there is no belief in the mind, the recognition that the mind itself is a myth, it does not exist, that thoughts come and go, but thoughts that come and go are not the truth, they are not reality. And it is just to be aware of the thoughts, aware of the moving, changing, everything that is moving and changing as that which is still. And this is the incredible grace, that indirect experience. We can be the awareness because this is already true nature. We can be the awareness that is aware of the moving, changing, and rest as the still, silent presence of being that is simply, naturally aware of what is moving and changing, ebbing and flowing, and come to the recognition with indirect experience that all that is truly known is the still, silent being, because it's the direct, natural experience. The stillness, the silence, the emptiness, openness of being. It is what is here now, indirect experience, without a thought about this moment, without referencing thought, without referencing past, without evaluating this moment. There's a freedom here. It is a habit to constantly reference past and to contextualize the moment according to past experience. That is why we speak of knowing nothing. To know nothing, to be empty, is to be free. To be freedom itself. Empty, open, infinite, eternal being. This is not a process. It's not a mind process. It's not about processing your stuff. It's about seeing through the illusion, the delusion of the mind story, and seeing quite simply in the light of awake awareness that it is not true, that it is not reality, because reality is known in the direct experience of being here now, of simply being. That the direct experience of being the awake awareness and remembering true nature is the confirmation that is needed to end the addiction to the delusion of separation and the mind's constant, perpetual need, desire, mechanism, learned habitual mechanism to keep itself alive with all of these ideas about what it has to do, that it has to process things, that it needs to work its way through things. All of the ways that the mind sees this is delusion, quite simply. And it's so important that we bring the remembrance of this, because it is very easy for the mind to take hold of some of the things that are spoken here, conceptualize them, and make a process out of it. But that is not what we are ever speaking of. That is not what we are here for. We are here to see through the delusion of mind, to see through the whole myth of the mind and the me and this personal and the separate as an entity. When we are really pulled to know the true nature, when we are really pulled and sincere to know reality, we dissolve the world as we have known it. And we have to be ready for things to change. And we have to be willing, courageous, and sincere enough to let things go, to realize that nothing that we think is important and relevant in the life of the me has any relevance in reality. And we will be stripped of what does not serve in order to see clearly, in order to have the ego sense humbled. It is the most extraordinary grace when a life is ready enough that it brings in something disturbing enough to totally upset the equilibrium of my life. Because the me is so concerned with being comfortable, processing, keeping itself comfortable. The mind loves to talk about itself. It loves to talk about its process. It loves to keep alive its sense of me, separate, special, by talking about itself. None of this is relevant. We have to come to value silence and to come to recognize that if we are sincere and truly longing for this freedom, then we have to talk less and be silent more. We have to not be so ready to need to call someone and tell them about, to express and process everything through, because that is the mind's way of keeping the me that is engaged in my experience alive. That what we are speaking about here is not that. What we are speaking about here is seeing through the habit of that and coming to the deep silence of being, the letting go of life as it is, and noticing all the things that we are attached to. When there is a readiness, we will be challenged. When there is a readiness, we will be given what is needed. We do not have to look for it, but we do have to guard, care for our sincerity. And this is why we speak of the constant coming to remember the longing, the sincerity. In a way, the grace of satsang is to keep the fire of your longing and your sincerity alive, to keep the sense of devotion and one-pointedness alive, to keep illuminating all of the ways that we can stagnate and fall into complacency, all of the ways that we can say, well, you know, I'm going to take the weekend off because I've got some friends having a barbecue and I'd kind of like to go and just chitty chat about the world and just forget about, you know, having to stay present. But that's not sincerity. That's the mind's delusion, buying into itself. It's not that life doesn't happen, but it's so important to catch how the me can make a hobby out of this. And a hobbyist is never going to make it. That's for sure. If this is a hobby, if it's something to do to keep you amused and entertained, then there's no point, to be perfectly frank, because the sincerity in this, the sincerity has to be all the way through. And the speaking here is the true self to itself, the consciousness to itself that doesn't say, oh yeah, have a lovely time. You just flitter around, stop at lots of B&Bs on the way, have a fun time. What is speaking here is saying, do not delay. You have one human life here as an opportunity to realize your true nature. Are you going to waste it? Are you going to dilly-dally it away with the mind's beliefs, keeping itself comfortable? Or are you going to use this precious opportunity to recognize what is the true purpose of a human life and actually fall into the longing and sincerity that is alive in every heart, that but can be overlooked as a sense of desire for the me? Now, if the fire is not alive, the fire is not alive. But the speaking here is to turn a spark into a blazing fire, to turn a possibility into an earnest sincerity, is to shift a half-hearted possibility into a wholehearted one-pointedness, so that the ones that are ready, sincere and ripe in consciousness can grab the opportunity to fall in deep, 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 right? Can recognize the opportunity, can grasp the opportunity, seize the day, right? Seize the moment that says, okay, but it's not about believing. It's not about creating an experience. It's about feeling the fire inside, right? It's about recognizing that this opening and carrying this all the way to the remembrance of freedom is incredibly rare, incredibly rare. Are you the one that is ready to be the rare consciousness that is ready? Does that bring a fire inside you that says, yes, yes, let that be me, let that be me, right? Is there a sense when this is spoken that says, what does it take? I'm in all the way. Or is there a sense of, oh yeah, but what about this? What about that? Well, I'm not sure, I want to let go of, right? It doesn't matter. It does not matter, because it's not personal and it's not a choice. It's about a fire, a blazing fire of consciousness that is just longing to know itself. But as these words come to bring illumination, to invigorate and enliven the sincerity of that which is already here as an openness, as a longing, because none of that is ever personal. So it's not a personal thing if you don't really have that longing and if you don't really care, right? But it's just to recognize if there's a pull, if there's a sense within of being drawn in, of being called, of, the words can be tricky because the words can then be misinterpreted to say, well, it's not that way here. So it's to not take really any notice of the words, but to feel the aliveness of the resonance. Let the resonance bring you alive. Let the resonance bring you into a remembrance of what this life is for and what is the deepest longing of the heart. What is the deepest call? Even in the ways that it makes no sense to the mind. It does not have to, nor can it make sense to the mind. It is this natural pull that calls you to come to satsang, calls you to know yourself, calls you to freedom that is beyond what the mind can make sense of. And that is the glory, is that it makes no sense to the mind. It's what has you say yes to things that makes no sense to the mind, right? To find yourself moving in certain ways, staying in certain places, being called to be in certain environments, building things that you don't really know what they're for. Things like this, right? It's about this. It's about that there's a momentum, a flow that doesn't make sense to the mind. And yet there's an observing of a way of being, a way of saying yes to things that don't make sense, because somehow it brings you so alive to say yes without knowing what it means or where it's going to lead or how, right? To know that the means for everything to manifest and express itself is just the wholehearted yes to truth, because nothing matters. Nothing matters in the way that the mind does. All that matters is this call to freedom, and that the listening to the call to freedom is responded to. We could say it's like a kirtan, right? That the call asks for the response, and the call asks for the response, just as in kirtana, for there to be a response that repeats back wholeheartedly with absolute devotion and sincerity what the call is calling you to, right? Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, right? Jai Ma, Jai Ma, Jai Ma. It's this call to repeat back what doesn't make sense to the mind, to just follow the resonance and repeat it back with your yes, with your yes, with your yes, to find the sincerity that isn't about how or why or what about, but I have to, or I should, or I don't really know how that's going to work. It's not about getting stuck in the small stuff, right? It's about saying yes to the moment, because only this moment is real. Only this moment is true. And in the saying yes to this moment, there's a saying yes to the true self, to your true self, the one true self. And the saying yes is saying yes to the glory, saying yes to God, saying yes to divinity, to the light, without knowing how the details are going to work themselves out. But it's this wholehearted yes that brings you alive. It brings you alive with an excitement. It brings you alive with an anticipatory sincerity that has got no idea how it is possible. And yet there is no opposite to a holy yes, right? No isn't even a possibility, because the holy yes is calling with a wholehearted sincerity that says, I know what this life is for. I know what I am here for. I know what this calling is inside me. I know what this desire is. I know what I have been longing for my whole life, and what I have been looking for and not finding is myself, is my true essence nature, and the oneness with divinity, the oneness with Mother, with Divine Mother, with the glory, with God, with life, with love, with perfect love. It does not matter the words that we use. It is about the resonance and being alive in the resonance. It's, you know, it's just the sense of, yes, yes, this, where it makes no sense to the mind. The glory is that it does make no sense to the mind, and the willingness to be humbled into a depth of a sincerity and yes that makes no sense to the mind, that you can't explain your way out of. You can't explain it to yourself, to companions. You can just rest in an illuminated yes that says, this is where I feel true. This is the truth that feels alive here. That's all that can be expressed, is this. aliveness, this truth, this resonance, right? It's to recognize this within is such a huge part of the unfolding, because we can meander in life feeling discontented, disturbed, just not quite there, like there's stuff that's in the way. And we can have all of these ideas of, well, perhaps I need to do this. Perhaps I need a little bit more of this. Perhaps I need to try this. Perhaps this is going to help. And we can get distracted with all of these ways that we think a little bit more of this, a little bit more of that is going to help. But the truth is that until we are absolutely on fire with the longing and the recognition of the truth that is calling us from within, then a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and listening to the mind that thinks, well, why don't you try this? Try not eating sugar. Try not eating sugar. Give that a go. Maybe then you're going to feel better. Why don't you go and do some therapy? Why don't you go and do this? Why don't you try this? Why don't you explore this? All of these ways that the seeker mind keeps itself alive. Try this, try that. Because you know what's underneath that is, try this, and you'll try it for a little bit, and then you'll be disappointed, and then you're going to feel exactly what you need to feel to keep alive the needs met structure that says you're not worthy, you're never going to get it. Keep trying. Let your life be a kind of constrained trying to get there, because that's all you're really worthy of, right? This is the story of the mind. The mind says, keep that seeker alive. Keep that seeker alive, because so often we have learned so young that our means of survival is to suffer, that our needs met structure, the way that we survive within a dysfunctional family system, a family structure, is to find the part that we have to play to make everyone feel comfortable. So we find the part that we have to play, and often the part that we have to play is a part that means struggling, suffering, putting ourselves down, being miserable, right? So the needs met structure, our learned survival mechanism to keep us connected to feeling like we're seen, we're validated, we're recognized, is through actually struggling, right? Because when we were in our young life, we were noticed when we suffered. We were noticed when we kicked up a fuss. We were honored when we were taking responsibility for everyone. Oh yes, you're so good. You're so good because you're doing all those things and you're working hard, right? And so this learned mechanism of being seen can be to keep this strategy that we learned so young, the needs met structure, to keep that alive, keep suffering, keep being unworthy, keep being unlovable. Because when you're unlovable and you're feeling small and you're feeling upset, you learned young that then that was a way to get attention, right? That you didn't get attention when you were your true self. And of course, this is so instinctual in the young life, because what's happened in the young life is that the guardians and parents were projecting their unworthiness and their need to be powerful, not meaning to be unkind, doing their best, but they project their need to be powerful. They project what they went through as a child often upon their children. And so the projection goes on and the needs met structure, because the parents are still often in a needs met structure and they need to be playing out their survival mechanism and they project it upon the child, and then the child learns their subtly manipulated needs met structure. And then this becomes our habituated strategy for the whole of the human life. And in a way, there's even the possibility that we carry those structures, right, within the vasanas and the desire mechanism, that we can come in with them. They can be like karmas, right? So we have to realize there's such deeply ingrained patterning in our human condition and in the mind strategy. And here we are speaking about freedom from the mind, being utterly free from the mind. And it brings us up against our needs met structures. It brings us up against our survival mechanism. It brings us to these places that feel like an edge, where to have humility and courage and sincerity and follow the holy yes and the aliveness of the heart means letting go and meeting the edge of a survival mechanism. And the survival mechanism can be to play it small, to suffer, to be not enough, to feel dependent, like on your partner or your family or your children, to feel a certain dependency and to be entangled in these relational dynamics that keep us in our needs met structure, that are completely disempowering. And they keep the seeker alive. They keep the sense of unworthiness alive. They keep the sense of the mind that just loves actually to suffer. Sorry to say it, but it does. The mind loves to suffer. The mind loves nothing more than for the pain body to be activated and to be in a story of the victim, self-pity, poor me, poor me. But this is, where within the context of self-improvement and making a better me, we can keep trying to be self-empowered and make a better me. But there'll come a point where we're again disappointed, because we cannot actually find freedom from a limited context until we see through the whole delusion. We have to see through the whole illusion of separation and the complete delusion of the mind's story and making. And what it takes to see through this delusion is everything. And we will only give everything when there's a sincerity of longing, that the call from God to God is alive and awake enough that nothing else will hold us back, that there's a willingness, we could say within consciousness, to create a situation that will free us. What we create is what is commonly known as guru, right? So the way that guru is spoken of here is slightly different to the way that it might be commonly used. What guru is that our longing is deep enough that we come into connection through our holy yes with Sat Guru, the light, the grace, the one, the divinity. We come into connection deeply enough that we're saying yes to a depth of sincere truth, that we create exactly the circumstances that will guide us into the deepest possible remembering. And now part of that is that it might look like guidance and support, but it's bigger than that. It's so much bigger than that. And it doesn't look like the conventional idea within the spirituality of a guru as a person. Guru is never a person, although part of opening to guru to guidance, to Deshika, part of that may bring in some kind of guidance, but it might also bring in a character that is not a guide in the way, a conventional way. It can also bring in characters that are actually here to bring challenges, bring a crumpling, but it will bring in situations, and it's the whole situation that is the grace of Guru, right? So sometimes it can be spoken in the Vedic teachings, in the ancient teachings, that we cannot come to the fullness of self-realization without Guru. And we imagine that we have to find, you know, an Indian man wearing a loincloth with a beard and some dreadlocks tied up on the head, and maybe carrying a trident, living, you know, the life of a sadhu or swami in order to receive the grace. And we can wonder, well, how am I ever going to receive that grace when I'm born in this Western life? Will I have to go to India? Will I have to go to, you know, wherever? But the truth is, you don't have to go anywhere. Although we might be carried as part of the unfolding, the truth is, you have to go into yourself. You have to follow the call, and the call will carry you into whatever situations you need to be carried into. And the whole situation, the whole grace of the unfolding is the Sat Guru. It's you in connection with yourself. It's that the depth of your longing and the depth of your sincerity is creating an appearance of a life circumstance that is the reflection of Guru. It's the grace. It's the grace of the depthful recognition of yourself. And it doesn't have to look like conventional or imagined ideas of what that is. And it's never about bowing to anyone, but it is about bowing to yourself, to your own sincerity. It is about bowing to your own longing and recognizing that the circumstances of the life that are coming forward are being born out of your own longing, are being born out of the consciousness that is being called to evolve into its divinity. And so when we are ready, sincere, and really truly in the holy yes, life will bring forward exactly the circumstances that are needed to point us, carry us, guide us, challenge us, humble us, bring us to our knees, because this is what it takes. And the ego sense will normally not like it at all. And the ego sense will normally try to fight it on certain levels. But the truth is that when our sincerity is alive enough, there is already something deeper, a knowing that is deeper, that keeps us moving in the situation, despite what the mind says, because there's a recognition within, oh, this is the time of Guru. This is the time of grace. This is not happening because you've done something wrong or you made a wrong turn. This is happening because you're saying yes to the glory. Never looks like what we imagine it's going to look like. And it's never about the characters in the play. And this, in the play of life, this period can be quite a long period of time. It doesn't have to be, you know, a short period of time. It doesn't look like what we think it's going to look like. And it might bring different characters in that are all part of this graced unfolding. And some of those characters will play as challenging characters. And we come to realize as we deepen and deepen that every character that has come in has been guru, has been part of this flow of grace that has been to illuminate the darkness and bring it to the light. That it's been the grace of Kali Ma, it's been the grace of the Mother, and it is created out of your sincerity. It's created out of the intensity of your sincerity that brings circumstances that can be challenging to have to move through and to see through, and how we have to keep meeting the mind and its wanting to protect and separate, how we have to keep facing the pull to protect and pull away and go into a defended mind complex. But that when we are truly ready for this, that we just keep saying yes, because we know that it's not about any of the external characters, that we know that it's about staying true to the longing and recognizing 100% responsibility for our own creation. And when the priority of the life, that the focus is the sincerity that's absolutely turned towards the recognition, remembrance of this freedom in this lifetime, then part of that is that we take complete responsibility for whatever we create as part of our dedicated, sincere commitment of handing the life over to God, that we then take complete responsibility. And the responsibility is not someone's responsibility. It's an alignment with divine responsibility. It's an alignment which is a surrender that says, thy will be done, until there's only a knowing of thine in complete oneness, that there's no difference between my and thy. It's all one. It's just a submission, a surrender of the sense of me, so that there's only one, and all that is happening is that. Nothing can be outside of that. So there can be no blame, no judgment, no playing out of all of these kind of practices, strategies of defense, because we're in the knowing of the being, and we're in the depthful surrender that recognizes there's only one, and everything is this same one. And every move is a flow of grace. Every move is the flow of guru, right? It's life. Life is guru, we could say. Life's flow is guru, is flowing to bring in exactly the appearance of what is needed, and is asking us to not turn away from it, resist it, but to receive it and align with life, as life, right? And the way that we come into this and the deepening is to come to the being, to be yourself, to be here now, the presence of being, awake and aware, and not moving in the strategic patterns of defense, not trying to get away from anything, but knowing that if anything is alive and stirred in the nervous system, that this is Guru visiting. It's grace for Guru to visit, right? That Guru is the Satguru. It's your inner guide. It's the light within that is guiding you. And yes, part of that brings the companionships and the guidance and support, but it's not to separate the moment in any way. It's to know that it's the flow of life itself that is Guru, that is the guide, the teacher, the grace, that is carrying everything. And our invitation is to let go into that flow and be carried, whatever it looks like, whatever happens, to be carried, to be a living surrender, a living, depthful surrender in every moment. And so it's to know that we are opening out of the sense of personal and limitation into the impersonal, unlimited. We're opening to be the freedom, to be life, to be the unified field of pure consciousness that is completely wise and intelligent and knows how to move, and it knows how to use the intelligence to create the appearance of everything that is needed, right? And what is needed is the appearance of everything that will trigger our needs met structure and survival mechanisms. In a way, it's like having to have these are incredible meetings with your own fear, all of your adversity, everything that you don't want, you have to sit down and come to a oneness with, right? Welcome fear, welcome anxiety, welcome self-hatred, welcome stress, welcome unworthiness, welcome unlovableness, welcome I'm not good enough, welcome I hate that part of myself, welcome you're doing it wrong, welcome, welcome, welcome. Every single fiber of the being that feels to be something that you don't want in the life. Welcome pain, welcome judgment. Welcome the one that is not seen. Welcome the one that no one listens to. Welcome the one that feels uncared for. Welcome the one that never feels like they have truly been successful. Welcome the one that never feels like they have reached their true potential. Welcome the one that feels numb and invisible. You know, the list goes on. The list goes on. But let's have a party. Let's invite them all. Right? In a way, this is what it's about. Because all of these places, right? All of these places are the mind. All of these places are the learned beliefs that the mind has taken on that make up the great misunderstanding that keeps the seeker alive and the sense of separation alive. It can actually be quite helpful to sit down and make a list of all of your friends that you would like to invite to the party, right? To actually acknowledge all of these parts. Just to acknowledge that we have these parts. It's not to psychoanalyze. It's not to make anything of it. But as we welcome all of the threads of what we are, in order to see through the mind, we have to illuminate the mind. Welcome the child that was never met with presence. Welcome the child that didn't feel seen. Welcome the child that didn't feel loved. Because we start to illuminate the needs met structure. Welcome the child that felt like they were not seen unless they were having a tantrum. That the only attention they got was when they were put in their bedroom and the door was shut. But that was somehow a feeling of being seen, right? That we welcome these places that are alive in us and that play as needs met structures, not to psychoanalyze, not to work with them as a process, but to illuminate that we have these deeply held beliefs and to illuminate that they're not actually true, that we bring them to the light, we bring them out of their hiding place where they have the capacity to hold us captive, right? Where they hold us captive as fears. How will I be seen? What will happen if I say that? Oh, I can't do that. Oh, I better not do that. I better not say that. That might break the sense of connection. I might create a conflict, or I might create a disturbance, and I wouldn't want to do that. It's just within our own functioning to start to illuminate all of these places so that we can actually see that they are not true, but they can hold us captive in separation and in seeking, right? Seeking for strategies to make these parts of us better. How can I heal that part? Maybe I need to, go and see someone. Maybe I need to talk about it. Maybe I need this. Now, sometimes when there is intense trauma that's held, it can be useful to have to express the trauma and have it heard compassionately in order just to shift some energy, but not even always. It depends on our capacity to be able to be fully present. And if you notice that there's something that keeps cycling and cycling, then maybe some support is needed, but it's not essential, because when we really come down to it, it's all the mind and none of it is true. But we have to move in a way that feels aligned for where we are in the unfolding. But it's also to know that the mind will always tell us that there's something broken that we have the possibility of fixing. And if you just try this, maybe you'll fix it. If you just try this, maybe then you're going to feel better about yourself. But as long as there's a me trying to fix a me, we're in the delusion, essentially. And the courageous sincerity of our true longing for freedom will help us to come to the ability to just be present with whatever is arising and just stay fully present. In a way, it's that we've had a learned avoidance of being present with feeling uncomfortable. But we have to be able to meet discomfort. We have to be able to meet what happens without necessarily needing to talk about it and tell people about it, right? Again, we're so used to, when something happens, instead of being with it, immediately phone a friend. Oh, you know what just happened? I just received a letter. I just received this, or so-and-so just said this to me, right? Immediately talk about it and move away from actually being present with it, right? Sometimes it's useful to know, only talk about who is present. Don't talk about anyone that is not present. If there's something to talk about that you want to tell someone else about what they did, perhaps you should be facing that being, right, that's involved in the situation, and actually meeting yourself, but facing it with the being rather than talking about it and distracting away from your own feelings and your own unfolding by talking about it, needing to talk about someone else. And certainly if there is a need to be in companionship to process something, it's always to ensure that you're not talking about in a way of projecting or giving any life to the characters, but you're truly seeing that everything that's happening is only happening for you, and that you're only speaking about it through your own direct experience, and not speaking about it as if someone else as a character is wrong, or they did this, or they did that, or they said this, because all of that is your own interpretation. And so to be able to meet yourself and to see that your interpretation is your unique view that's just inviting you into a depthful surfacing of your own unconscious material. And this is the depth of sincerity that we are inviting in one-pointedness, is a depth of sincerity that we're willing to not keep believing the mind, not keep allowing the mind to be the master, the guru, right? But to allow life and the flow of life to be seen as that which brings us to the possibility of deepening into the true nature. So here now, the simplicity of being, the openness of presence, of recognizing that you are here now, simple, open, free. You are the awake awareness, aware of the moving, changing, and yet never disturbed by anything that is moving and changing. So a big part of this unfolding is to recognize that you are the being, the true essence nature is the being that is open, awake awareness, that is not disturbed or changed in any way by the play of the world, so that nothing that happens can disturb the being that you are. And this is integral to being able to open to the feelings that come forward, the stresses that come forward in the face of life. It's allowing life to be the guide, not believing the mind and the me, not just jumping to the immediate assumption that is habitual, but resting as the presence of being that is present to, awake to the moment, including everything, but not making a relationship of identification by shifting the attention to bond with an object in any way, keeping the openness of awareness. So being here as the being, open and free, recognizing the openness and the freedom and spaciousness of being, the openness that is the heart, the simplicity, the naturalness, and also noticing where there are places that want to pull the attention, but not identifying with them by letting the attention identify, but by staying awake and aware so that everything can be illuminated. And this is where we start to illuminate the needs met structure. It's where we start to illuminate, oh, those are the habits, those are the learned habits. Oh, I have a tendency to move in this way. I have a tendency not to say what I truly want to say because I'm afraid. I have a tendency to just snap and shut things down. I have a tendency to walk out of the situation when I am uncomfortable and I can't face it. I have a tendency to churn it in my mind and make it mean that I'm somehow done something wrong, or that there's something wrong with me. I have a tendency to want to smooth things over by taking responsibility for other beings' actions or whatever, right? We start to just illuminate what the tendencies are without being critical, without any judgment, without needing to understand. We just illuminate the places that hold attachment and can pull the attention into distraction. So there is a benefit to having an intimacy, illumined intimacy with the way that the laws of nature are. So that there can be an illumination that allows a welcoming, a surfacing, and allows the needs met structure, the habits of behavior that were learned not to be running the show right now, right? And it allows actually relational dynamics to clear and purify, it makes life easier because we're not playing out the same dynamics. But we will also, in this, have to meet dynamics that we've created, that we're entangled in. We can be in relational dynamics where we've created a repeating structure, and it takes illumination and sincerity to free the structure of certain relational dynamics, right? In order to free all of the ways that we move from conditioning. And all of this is, in truth, in the deepest sense, completely irrelevant. All of it is irrelevant. The only reason that we speak of it is because the tangle is so thick that if we don't illuminate it, it's like illuminating it shows the way out of it, out of the depth of the tangle. And the depth of the tangle is the great misunderstanding that is the collective tangle, collective consciousness that is in separation. So we have to be able to illuminate in our own inner functioning in order to extract ourselves and untangle from the collective, to untangle ourselves from the repeating karmas, so that we can truly follow the sincerity and receive the grace of Satguru, Satguru Jaima, right? It's so that we can receive the grace and follow the flow of life's intelligence that is carrying us perfectly. That every situation, if it has anything in it that feels sticky, it's an opportunity to meet that stickiness and to smooth it out within your own nervous system, within your own functioning. So here now, the wide open, expansive being that you are is here, free, in the knowing of itself, simple, silent, still, boundless, natural. The reason that we taste this, and it can feel so clear, and then we have a sense that we don't abide in it, that we get pulled back into the life, is exactly because of everything that we're speaking about here. Because there's needs met structures and strategies of egocentric behavior that keep pulling us in to repeating and repeating. So this too can be the grace of how life can bring in companionship and pointings that will bring the possibility of bringing very fine pointings that help there be a seeing through, right? It's grace indeed. It doesn't feel comfortable to the ego because it's a humbling of the ego. But we cannot come to the remembrance of self and freedom, the freedom of realization, and to live this with the ego intact, right? Impossible. Impossible, right? It's just not, it couldn't happen because the ego and the egocentric behavior is the mind, and the recognition of true nature and freedom is the seeing through of mind, seeing that mind has no relevance, that mind is protection, defense. And so we have to see through the protection and defense in order to come to freedom. Every little don't like that, don't want that, don't like it when you say that, whatever, all of these little defenses, every single little time that there's a little jump to defend a feeling of what you're making it mean about you, right? Notice how subtle it is, right? That someone can just say, oh, I'd rather that you didn't do that. Why? You know, right? There can just be this way of just defending. None of it matters. Nothing matters. The only reason it's happening is so that you can notice, so you can have the grace of noticing, wow, I reacted to that. Wow, I feel a little defense in my nervous system. Wow, I feel triggered. Wow, I'm feeling some stuff here. This is the grace. This is the flow of Guru that brings this. It's the flow of Satguru that brings this. And it brings it. Of course, it brings it for everyone. Every life is this flow. But the more sincere we are, the more the temperature will get turned up a little in the life, right? Because the more sincere we are, we're saying, show me who I am. Bring me to God, bring me into oneness. Whatever it takes, I'm ready. Take me all the way into you. And so as soon as we start really, really asking for this, we'll be given exactly what is needed. And we can't then imagine, oh, this thing in life that's happening is totally getting in the way of my spiritual life. I just want to meditate and be in the grace. But this situation in life, you know, that my partner has left me, that, a close relative has died, or there's some kind of stress that's arising. This is getting in the way. It's like, no, this is Guru bringing in exactly what is needed to humble and to bring you through those really intense feelings that are going to be felt as repeating old stress that you felt before. It's to keep feeling it, keep meeting it as sensation. Rest as the being, aware, recognizing that as the aware being, you're not touched and stressed by anything, whatever's happening. You're actually free. And where the feelings are, let the sensation be held in illuminating presence without the story, projecting, blaming, moving to shame and guilt, all of these strategies of protection, and come to the openness of being, right? Now, what we're speaking of, it doesn't happen in a flash, that's for sure. It takes as long as it takes. And we're speaking in terms of years, right? Not months of refinement. But the opening to freedom and the knowing of who you are can deepen exponentially in any moment, right? And the deeper that we go into the remembrance, the brighter the light, the more it just burns stuff away. It just burns it away, right? So it's not that we have to make a mind's idea of a process of, wow, I've got to go through this whole life. Not at all. It's not a process in time, right? So when we speak of that it can take time and it can take years, it can take as long as it takes to refine all the way into the glory. But it's to know that it's not a process in time. And what we mean by that is that even if on a certain level of the human experience, it seems like it's happening in time, it's not a process in time. So anything can happen in any moment, right? But we have to stay in what's true and not be moving in the psychological. What you can be sure of is if that you move in the psychological mind and the me to try to do the work, you're going to take lifetimes to do it, right? Then you're going to take like, oh, therapy and do this and do that. It's going to take a really, really long time because it's just cycling within a limited context. When we rest in the openness of being, the depth that we open to is the depth that we're working, right? Because the brighter the light of your knowing, the more that you can see, the deeper your sincerity, the more your devotion and one-pointedness, the brighter is the brilliance of that which can see. Because the more that you know the being that you are, the less attached you are to the residues of the protective mechanism. The deeper that you are, you might see it and you might feel a little thing, but there's a willingness to stay, the resolve to stay, to remain, and just meet the feelings that come, and really, not need to take 20 years just to spend a whole night sitting up. See it all the way through, right? So there's no measure in this, but things can move very quickly. Deepening can happen into the timeless, illuminated radiance. It's not a progressive path. It's not a process in time. It's an intelligent flow of grace, right? It's an intelligent flow of Guru, of Sat Guru, the inner guidance, the inner light. And all that is required is that you turn into facing, gazing into the light of your own holy yes, your own knowing of grace, your own knowing of the light of Guru, right? And that everything that's happening in the life is the grace of Satguru, is the grace of divinity that is carrying itself into itself in utter devotion, in utter surrender. This is what is happening. This is the naturalness. The intelligence is the flow that knows, and all that is being invited is that we recognize, oh, this is the purpose of this life. And just to say yes to myself, to the glory, to love, to truth, wholeheartedly, to feel the knowing and the alignment of being in the flow of attraction, and just rest here, saying yes and yes and yes, because there is no option to say no, right? It's choiceless to find yourself here, choiceless, that there's an aliveness, a call, and the words that are spoken here are just to point, illuminate, and support, like a tour guide, this way to remembrance, this way, right? It's like pointing that the direction to point in is within, right? It's just like holding a signpost that says, not out there, in. However many words come, whatever flavor they take, the only pointing that ever comes forward here is in. Be here now, in yourself. Stay here, remain. No one's doing anything. No one's doing anything. No one can give you this, even if they think they can, even if you think they can. No one can give you this. Nothing of the world can give you this. Can be pointed, but only your sincerity. Only you can find yourself within yourself. Only you can give this to yourself, the remembrance of freedom. It's out of the sincerity and the depth of the call and the brilliance of the holy yes that is recognized. So, it is the ability to recognize the resonance of yourself. Because what will also happen in the play of the external is that you will recognize, you will come to be more adept at the recognition of true resonance that is truly pointing and truly pointing you within. And where there are resonances that the mind enjoys, right? So we become more adept so that we're not so fragmented and that we're not feeling like, oh, well, that kind of is, I like doing that, that supports me. That we start to notice, actually, that isn't the true frequency of myself. You start aligning with the frequency of yourself and attune to the fineness, the fineness, the fineness of the resonance. And what truly is pointing you into yourself, to know that it's about coming into yourself and attuning more and more finely to the frequency of your own knowing and being able to recognize what supports that and what doesn't. Which things are like the mind's enjoyment activities, like spiritual activities that the mind enjoys, and what is actually enlivening the resonance. Now, this will also be different for each being, each point, because the laws of nature are different. It's not across the board. None of this is across the board. It's completely unique at every point. And that's why you have to be the attuned adept that can recognize the Satguru inside your innermost resonance of recognition, right? You have to recognize where the enlivening is and where not so much, right? So just being here, resting here in the wide open, naturally expansive, infinite, eternal, timeless being, remembering true nature, your true nature, that the words here are the consciousness speaking to itself. So the attunement is with yourself, that how you receive this is all about your own knowing and your own resonance. Right? The stillness, the silence, the simplicity of just being, the knowing of the being that knows only itself. Nothing else is needed. Everything is here. In the emptiness, there is a fullness that could not ever be imagined by the mind. And yet the mind belongs in its true nature, in its utter collapse. It finds its belonging. We could even say that the mind finds its true nature, its freedom, in a way, first of all, as like a cosmic mind, finds that it belongs to a universal mind, and then it deepens its illumination of its essential nature. So resting here, resting here.